from Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, for the last generation,
I'm
you have a choice.
the Republican
I
candidate
did
for
not
governor.
have sexual relations
And
with
I
that woman.
realized that this is something
Miss
he is
Lewinsky.
We're not going to
inherent.
be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey, good morning, Cleveland. Welcome to the Village Green Town Center Whoop Radio. Welcome to Backfire with John Stansberry and Franklin Chansey. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Hey, I know that y'all didn't stay up and watch the debate or anything like that last night, did you?
And the show after, and the show after, and the show after.
You know, I get wound up watching these things, and I can't go to sleep. I just get wound up. I thought it was a good debate. You know, I'm still thinking from the first debate how good it was for the Republicans. And last night I was trying to determine the difference. I thought Barack Obama was definitely a little better prepared than he was for the first debate. There's no doubt about that. He kept trying to fire some rubber bullets, but I didn't see any. I didn't see any real wounds come from that last night. I thought Mr. Romney did a good job of presenting facts and being presidential. You know, I don't agree with the commentator there.
Well, actually, before that, probably within 30 minutes after the debate was over, she came back and more or less apologized and said she was in fact wrong and that Romney, in essence, was correct in what he said.
I watched everything she said. That's not what she said at all.
No, she came out later, Franklin. She sent a statement out. She actually issued a statement that she shouldn't have intervened and that Romney was in. She went back and looked at the transcript of what the president said in the Rose Garden and that Romney was in effect correct.
The problem was that Romney went after the wrong speech there.
The problem was the president was misrepresenting what he said. He used the word terror, but he did not label it as a terrorist attack, and he didn't address the fact that for 2 weeks afterwards, he actually denied it was a terror attack.
Hold on, John. What he said, what he referenced were acts of terror. I saw the video myself last night.
While he was talking about the original 9/11.
This is where Governor Romney made his error last night, and this is what all the conservative commentators were saying. It's not my opinion. After the debate, I watched the Fox report on it to see what they were saying because I wanted to know what the opposition thought. And they said, basically, he went after the wrong speech.
They said he missed an opportunity. He could have hammered it harder.
The problem is that if he had gone after the speech that or the presentations that were given by the UN ambassador, which everybody now believes were not accurate, he would have been on sound footing. But instead, what he did was go after a speech where the president was acknowledging the loss of these service folks here, who sending a message to people around the world that we're not going to just take it. It's not going to change who we are, that sort of thing. He went after the wrong speech, and that's where he got caught.
He didn't get caught at all. The sad thing here, Franklin, is that you want to talk about how Romney did this or that when the fact of the matter is a U.S. ambassador was killed for the first time in, I think, 29 years. 4 other people were killed. This administration has lied to the American people for weeks on end, and now they're involved in a cover-up to avoid from admitting, A, that they didn't have the forethought to be prepared on 9/11 anniversary, and B, that they actually refused requests for increased security, and then C, they went out and lied to the people and said that some video caused it when everybody on the ground, the State Department was watching live video footage of the attack in real time while it happened. And this administration told the American people for 2 weeks that there was a demonstration in the streets when the live video shows clearly there was no one in the streets.
Hold this administration responsible,
John,
for what it does. But by golly, step up to the plate and take the responsibility that falls on your party, the one that came forward and cut $300 million out of the security budget for these facilities.
Actually,
that's exactly what happened.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because Congressman Issa has shown the State Department is sitting on $2.2 billion that's earmarked for embassy security that they have refused to spend because they said they don't want it to appear that they have to have increased security. The State Department has $2.2 billion in surplus earmarked for security, Franklin, that they're not spending.
You know, this happened in Libya. There's no doubt President Obama has been going around for weeks talking about this was caused from a video.
Well, when he's not campaigning in Las Vegas and raising money for his reelection.
Franklin, did he not go on for weeks talking about it was caused from the video?
Did he personally say that?
Yes.
He said it on The View.
Yes.
He said it in the UN. He mentioned the video 6 times in his UN speech.
That discussion was about more than just the Benghazi incident, though.
He didn't call it a terrorist attack in the UN speech.
Because there were numerous of these protests going on outside of embassies around the region there. It wasn't just limited to Benghazi. So you're mixing apples and oranges when you say that.
Do you know how many hits that YouTube video had on 9/11 when supposedly that's what sparked this? It had a total worldwide of 3,000 hits.
It wasn't
3,000 hits.
The problem was that television stations in the Middle East,
in Egypt,
were playing this
for the one day.
Al Jazeera doesn't just broadcast in Egypt, John.
It was broadcast on an Egyptian talk show
and got picked up by the other ones.
What else do you think were some of the most interesting comments in the debate last night? Franklin, I'll let you go first. What do you think that President Obama did a good job of with that debate last night?
Well, I thought what he did a good job of was highlighting the difference in the economic philosophies that are being espoused by the two parties. I think it's fair to say that there's some significant and substantial differences there. And it's really a philosophical
daylight and dark differences.
Well, it's a philosophical difference. The president made it clear that he thinks that if there's going to be any kind of tax relief, that it ought to be for the middle class. That's just the facts. That's what he thinks.
How's he going to get the tax relief
with
everything that he's got proposed? I mean, what's he got on the table?
First of all, let's be clear. Wait a minute. First of all, let's be clear about this.
I mean, let's just. No, we're not. How's he going to give tax relief?
First of all, I can't let that pass. These are the facts. Mitt Romney has proposed more spending than President Obama has. You look in his own budget, that's what it is. He's proposing a $500 billion increase in the defense budget. As we're coming out of war, not going into it. So he has no basis for talking about spending in this case. Second of all, what the president has said is that as we wind down those two wars that have gone on, that some of the money that we've been spending on those, that we can use to fund infrastructure improvements, which we all agree need to be made.
But Franklin, he said that we shouldn't have spent that money on those two wars and that we borrowed it and that it was going to be a savings. If he turns around and spends it,
what he said,
if he turns around and spends it on something else, it's not a savings.
That's not what he said
at all. What it is
John.
it's a new baseline in his spending. And by the way, when you say Romney has proposed $500 billion in increased funding for defense, do you know what the only real constitutional requirement for a president? To keep America safe.
Apparently, John, if you're a Republican president, the constitutional requirement is to blow the deficit up.
Oh, you mean you're saying that coming from your guy who, instead of cutting the deficit in half like he said he would, he's more than doubled it. $1 trillion deficit every year he's been in office.
What was the deficit? What was the deficit, John?
Half a trillion.
What was the deficit, John, the day he took office? $1.4 trillion.
He has run the deficit up more in 4 years, or really 3.5 years, than Bush ran it up in 8 years. And he said what Bush had done was unpatriotic and un-American.
That's true, John. And it's also true that 1 month before he took office, the economy went into the tank. Is
and
that
it's
not
worse,
true?
And it's worse now after his stimulus spending. It's worse now after all of his bloated budget.
John,
we are
you
actually,
couldn't possibly say
we
that.
have lower
truthfully.
growth this year than we had last year, and last year was lower than the year before.
But the word that you skip over there, John, is the fact we had growth. When he took office, it was shrinking.
No, Franklin, we have actually decreased in growth. There are over 1 million fewer construction
Decreasing
jobs.
in growth is growth, John.
Why have we been downgraded? Why's
Twice.
America been downgraded twice?
Because the Republican Party won't come to the table.
He had
and
both
let us
houses of
solve the
Congress.
financial
He
problem.
had
Well,
both
do you know
houses
what?
of Congress.
Would
and he
that be
didn't
a
fix
good-
it.
Because the
Would that-
Republican Party walked away from a $4 trillion
would that be a
deficit
would that be a
reduction
good
plan.
reason to have a president that could work with both sides?
What evidence
like
would
Mitt
that
Romney
be?
did, like Mitt Romney did in Massachusetts?
Yes, like Mitt Romney did in
And that's
Massachusetts.
why all those people on the other side of the aisle have came out and said the way he did it was to go away and let us do the work.
Franklin, when he
That's
took
what they
office,
said.
when he took, you mean all the Democrats? That's what they said.
Well, they controlled the
when he took
Massachusetts
office in
legislature.
Massachusetts. He had a budget deficit, and when he left office, he left a surplus, and he cut taxes 18
And
times.
he had the lowest job growth in the
18
nation.
He cut taxes
The
18
lowest
times.
job growth in the
Franklin,
nation.
he turned their state budget around.
Had the best education in the
By the way,
country.
Franklin,
Sure, because he
in-
had to invest in
Franklin,
it.
in
They
2000,
want to cut education spending. You had to invest in health care. That was a great idea there. It's a terrible idea now.
because it was the state's
President
idea.
Yes.
flip-flop wants
Well,
to change his position on everything,
folks-
and then say, believe me, I know what I'm doing.
Folks, let me put it to you this way. In 2001, Barack Obama was available for employment just like Mitt Romney was. And when the Salt Lake City Olympics were going into the tank and already basically about to collapse in bankruptcy, let me see. They didn't call Barack Obama. They called Mitt Romney. And he turned the Olympics around and made it the first profitable Olympics in over 20 years. So, it looks to me like maybe they should have called Barack and he could have run it into an even bigger hole.
Here's some records that were set on Mr. Obama's watch. U.S. sovereign debt downgraded first in American history. Federal spending 25% of the GDP, high since World War II. Budget deficit 10% of the GDP, high since World War II. Federal debt 67% of the GDP, high since after World War II. Employment 58.1% of the population working, lowest since 1983. Long-term employment 45.9% of the total, high since 1930. Increase in non-farm payroll employment 0.05 since recovery began 26 months ago. Slowest job growth 26 months after a severe recession since World War II.
There's over 1 million
First of
fewer
all,
construction
I'll stop
jobs in
there.
America.
Okay, well, let's talk about all that.
Okay.
First of all, we don't have a recession since World War II as severe as the one we went into, number one. Number two, you said fewest number of people working. Well, that skips over the fact that we have the highest number of retirees we've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
That's the aging of the baby boom population.
Mm-hmm.
It's true that we have this large deficit, but it's also true that that's because we've had a dramatic fall off in revenue through a recession, which pumped up that. It's also true that when we came into office, we were already in two wars.
So
we didn't make that up.
Franklin, are you saying that he was so incompetent when he came into office that all these promises, like I'll cut the deficit in half?
Those promises were made before the
and
economy
did he
went in
keep
the
them?
toilet.
Wait a
John.
minute, Franklin. He came into office as the smartest man in America, and he was going to assemble the best collection
John,
of advisors
you can
in
try
America.
and try and
You mean I can try
to
and hold him to his word?
You can try to substitute snide comments for actual
I'm not
debate.
substituting
But the
snide
facts
comments.
are-
I'm substituting his words. If I don't get this done in 3 years, it's a one-term presidency. I will cut the deficit in
and
half.
that's why,
He
John,
doubled it.
your party met the night that he was sworn in and pledged to oppose everything
Yeah, but
he
here's
did,
what's great about that, Franklin.
so that
he
you
had,
can ensure it,
he
because
had,
the facts is you would rather elect a president who's going to cut taxes than do anything for the American people.
I'm
That's
sorry, the
facts.
American people pay taxes, Franklin. So absolutely,
Not according to your client, they
I
don't.
want an American president who will cut taxes. I do. Absolutely. And if you want an American president who will actually cut your taxes, vote for Mitt Romney.
Well, guess what? This president did cut taxes.
Actually, there's 18 tax increases on the middle class in Obamacare.
The first middle class tax cut in 30 years was passed by this president.
Bush cut taxes for everybody, Franklin. Think about what Franklin just said. The first one, Bush cut. If you're listening to me and you're an American citizen who pays taxes, George Bush cut your taxes. So, Franklin, on its face, that's an untrue statement that you just made.
How many truths and untruths do you think that were said last night from either side?
There were a couple.
Huh?
There were a couple.
Anything that you can refer to?
Well, sure. Matter of fact, there's a great story in the Times this morning.
Okay.
That goes over some of those on both sides.
All right.
Let's talk about some of those.
Okay, that's fine.
And I'll be fair. I'll talk about the Obama one first.
Okay.
There was this question about he wants to take this money, as John started to point out a moment ago, from savings as we wind down these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and apply those to bridges and schools and so forth. John is correct in pointing out that, in fact, that's money we're already spending, that we're doing basically borrowing.
Well, he claimed he was going to save all this money from
John,
the war.
Isn't that what I just said?
Well, no, my point is, I'm not.
Isn't that what I just said?
Disagreeing with you.
Now you're disagreeing with yourself.
What I'm adding to it is that he told us originally that when we wound the wars down, we could not spend the money at all.
What are we talking about here? We're talking about something that the president said that didn't prove to be accurate. That's what I'm doing. We're going to see if you're as reasonable when we're talking about Governor Romney. That is, in fact, something we're talking about. Governor Romney tried to get out of his statement that that he hadn't really supported letting Detroit go bankrupt. The fact is, everybody who looked at it knows exactly what he meant. He thought, or at least suggested, that private equity was going to somehow come in and resurrect the day for it. But the facts are...
Franklin.
Hold on. Let me finish.
So far, you've talked more than anybody.
Well...
Go ahead, though.
I'll give you 30 more seconds.
The facts are that translates into 3 minutes in a presidential debate. The facts is that no banks were going to lend money to Detroit at that point. They weren't lending money to anybody. The credit marks were frozen. That's why we were in a recession. So nobody actually thought that was going to be the case. So to the extent that Governor Romney tried to suggest that his policy was something that it wasn't, that wasn't accurate. There's two quick examples.
Let's talk about that. Franklin, avoiding the super technical term of bankruptcy and just speaking in generalities the way the public perceives bankruptcy, are you telling me that what the president did wasn't taking GM through bankruptcy?
No. What I'm telling
you
is,
in other words,
it wasn't let Detroit go under, which is really what...
No, Franklin, if you listen to, I'm sure you were despondent in the first debate, but if you really listen to what Mitt Romney said, what he said was, we have bankruptcy laws. You're an attorney. I'm sure you've handled bankruptcies. There is a court procedure for bankruptcies. What Mitt Romney said is allow General Motors to enter the normal bankruptcy procedures. And by the way, the only difference between what Obama did and what the general bankruptcy procedures would have been was Obama awarded his friends extra money and punished his enemies. And before you shake your head, if you worked for Delco or Delphi, GM Delphi, and you were a member of the union, you got your pension bumped up by the Obama administration's playing with the bankruptcy laws. But if you were a Delphi employee, which was the bulk of them, who were non-unionized, you actually saw nearly all of your retirement and your benefits wiped out. Now, Franklin, as an attorney who understands equal protection under the law, if you have two employees of the same company and only one difference, one's a union member, one's not a union member, and one of them sees more money put into their account and the other one sees their account wiped out, is that equal protection under the law?
First of all, the president didn't do that.
He absolutely did that.
No, he didn't.
Well, his administration, would a judge have done that, Franklin?
First of all, John, a judge did do it.
A judge signed off on what the administration crammed down our throats.
And the judge is required to do what's legal in the circumstance.
Oh,
but that's not the point, John.
But
that's not the point, John. The point is that Mitt Romney's proposal would have let the American automobile industry go under.
It would have let them go into the... Are you telling me that no bankruptcy happened in this country for the last 4 years?
No, John.
So you mean bankruptcy laws functioned for everybody else but not for GM?
No, John.
Do you think that Mr. Obama saved Ford also at the same time?
Not at all. Ford didn't go into this year. But you know what? He actually provided a huge benefit to Ford, because Ford's dependent on many of the same suppliers that would have gone under if GM and Chrysler had gone under. The CEO of Ford, by the way, fully supported the bailout of GM and Chrysler. Now you tell me who does that for their competitor if they don't think it's in their in their own interest. And that's what happened. Alan Mulally.
Wonder why he didn't take some money when he was offered it.
Because they didn't need it.
Oh, they didn't want to have to get tied into that.
It wasn't a question
By
of
the way,
that.
folks,
They were making a profit.
A ton of the money that you as a taxpayer sent to Ford went to build plants in China. Over 60% of the increased jobs in the GM bailout, over 60% of the new jobs that the bailout saved are actually foreign jobs.
We didn't send money to Ford, John,
which
is what you just said.
I said then I misspoke. The money that the taxpayers sent to GM actually went to build plants and hire employees in China.
The bottom line is there are well over 1 million people working in America because of the
and those
saving of the
people
American
would have been
automobile
working
industry.
anyway,
No,
because
they would
we
not.
have, Franklin, if you say that as an attorney, what you're saying is that our bankruptcy system doesn't work.
No, John, what you're
Does
saying
our bankruptcy system work for people or not?
It works for a lot of people.
Then why wouldn't it have worked for them? That's all Mitt Romney said. Let GM and Chrysler have the
because
this president believes in changing the rules for his buddies.
Because, John, and you really do understand this, you're just taking the position. In order for those companies to survive, they had to have an infusion of capital.
Something similar to Cylindras?
No, there's no comparison at all between those.
Okay. Why didn't we bail Cylindra out?
Well, because Cylindra
we already bailed them out.
Was receiving an investment in a future industry.
Which, by the way, folks, the IRS has now said that Cylindra's bankruptcy filings are actually a tax avoidance scheme which two former bundlers for the Obama campaign will actually walk away not only with not paying their creditors, not only with not repaying the taxpayer, but they'll walk away with $350 million in tax credits.
What they have determined is the program from which Cylindra benefited has had less than 0.5% of waste and fraud in it, which is remarkable for a government program. That's what the independent auditors determined when they went through this program.
Now, does that include the battery company that's doing furloughs this week that got $155 million from Obama?
It includes the entire program, which was a $95 billion
By the
program.
way, Obama has complained over the $2 billion in money that's going into the oil industry, while he sent $90 billion into the Cylindra-type industries.
Which is the difference between investing in tomorrow and just trying to line the pockets of
but
your crony
if $2
friends
billion
today.
is wrong, how wrong is $90 billion, Franklin?
Because the investment ought to be in what's in the long-term benefit of the country as opposed to what's not.
Well, Franklin, if it was such a good investment, they wouldn't be going bankrupt.
Yeah,
Gosh,
what's
John,
going to? I mean, what's going to happen?
That's like saying Mitt Romney's a genius.
What did they change? They went bankrupt. Okay, GM.
Yeah.
They went bankrupt.
Yeah.
What did they change to keep from going bankrupt again?
Well, what they did was obtain wage concessions from lots of the employees in the case. Mm-hmm. They were able to shut down some plants that were outmoded.
You mean, wait a minute, he took over a company and shut down plants? Isn't that what he criticized Bain Capital for?
Well, first of all, he didn't do it, John. So quit saying
does
that.
he get credit or blame? So in other words, if there's anything bad, he doesn't have any blame for that. But if there's anything good, he gets all the credit for it.
What he gets credit for was saving 1 million jobs.
The jobs would have been there, Franklin, and you know it.
I don't, John.
Absolutely.
You say that, it's complete pie in the sky.
It happens all the time, Franklin.
Every economist that's looked at this says you're just wrong.
It happens all the time, Franklin. A company says we're broke, and we're broke in this case because of union contracts.
John,
and so they go out of business.
The CEO of Ford, who was profitable, said, please, Mr. President, please, government, bail out GM and Chrysler. Why?
But Franklin,
why would he possibly do that,
because
John?
we're addicted to bailouts.
Do you think he was getting any pressure from the unions?
Of course he was.
Well, so what? They were profitable. They were doing fine.
Actually, they're
John
not doing
thinks that's
fine. They were
it's
struggling.
all the what do you mean?
Ford was
had
struggling.
made a profit for 8 years in a row.
Ford was still struggling, and their
John,
sales
please.
didn't look good. Their truck sales were holding up, but they weren't in great
weren't
shape.
broke.
Everybody was in a bad time then, Franklin. Everybody. The problem here is the fundamental underlying problem for GM and for Chrysler was the union contracts, and this president protected the union contracts. Matter of fact, they actually got more money out of the deal.
They did not.
Their
They
pensions
did
went
not.
up, Franklin. He shorted all of the bondholders who had invested. If you were a bondholder who loaned money to GM, guess what? He wiped you out. If you were a retiree who had bonds that you were holding in your retirement fund, the president said, too bad, I need this for my union buddies.
Most of those bondholders got substitute shares in GM stock,
Which is
as
worth
part of it.
less than half what it's below $20 a share.
Which would have been
when
so
he
much
did it.
better if your position had happened where they wiped it out completely.
Well, actually, Franklin, if
That's
they had
exactly what you're
actually,
saying,
Franklin,
John. There's
you
so
understand.
much hypocrisy
Franklin,
here.
you're
That's
a
exactly
lawyer.
what would have
You
happened.
understand exactly what would have happened. A bondholder actually is a secured investor, and
That's
he would
right,
have.
John. In a liquidation of
And
the company,
you're right.
which is what you're arguing
You're
for.
absolutely right. It is what I'm arguing
We
for.
avoided that.
We
A
did. We
liquidation
shouldn't.
Of the company
We shouldn't have
would been
avoided
the
it.
End of the automobile industry.
No, it would not, Franklin. It certainly would not. What have
certainly
happened
would
was another company, maybe a Toyota, maybe a Honda, would have come in, bought all the assets, cranked up the factory to make their cars, and hired the people back. The difference was the unions would have been broken, and that's all this was about. So the taxpayer had to bail them out to save the president's union buddies.
The president of Ford, John, the president of Ford, our profitable automaker, says, please bail out my competitors. And you think he did that because he wanted to help the union?
I don't
That's
think.
your theory?
Here's my theory. I don't think the government has any business bailing people out.
Well, I got that part, John. And if you'll stick with that, I understand it at least.
Well, we've
But
stuck
quit
with it
trying-
for
but
200
quit try-
years.
But quit trying to make up these facts that aren't facts.
Romney stated, this is where this all started, that GM should have been allowed to go through the normal bankruptcy law procedures. So this president said, guess what? I'm the king, and I'm going to put new procedures in place for my buddies. That's all there is to it.
He didn't do that, John, and you know it.
Did he follow the normal procedures?
Yes.
No, he didn't, Franklin.
Yes, he did, John.
Franklin,
It went through the bankruptcy
I
process
tell you
of
what, tell
reorganization.
the Delphi employees who saw their pensions wiped
Tell
out.
the Delphi employees who have a job now who would
They
have been
don't
out of
have a
business
job,
otherwise.
Franklin. That's the problem. They're all suing him. He's being sued by all the non-union Delphi employees because he wiped their pensions out.
And they will fail.
All right.
Oh, they'll fail.
They will
Let me
fail.
see if I got this straight. Now, wait, I just want to make
They
sure.
will fail because legally they're wrong.
Here's a Delphi employee who worked his entire life, who had promises made, like this president likes to brag about, and had a pension promised. And this president's plan increases the union Delphi employees' pension while at the same time wiping out the non-union Delphi employees. And you think that's okay?
What happened is, first of all, that the pension got some increases, which allowed the company to defer making payments for salaries right now. And in exchange, they gave up other benefits they were receiving and took wage cuts. There was a
Franklin,
trade-off
the Delphi
involved.
employees who were union saw a bump in their pensions. The Delphi employees who were non-union lost a pension.
And the explanation for that, John,
It
is
doesn't
in
matter. It's
all
wrong.
in as in
It's
all
wrong, Franklin.
bankruptcies.
It's wrong.
Here, I want to say something, then we're going to take a break. If you want to change the fruits, you will first have to change the roots. If you want to change the visible, you must change the invisible. That wise remark was made by Harv Eker, an author for businessman and motivational speaker. I thought it was real classic stuff. Anyway, let's take a break. We'll be back in just a minute.
I tried a lot of cars, Ford Pinto, the Pontiac Fiero, but the Volt was the first car that truly got me excited and looking into the prospect of buying American again. Yeah, I've heard they're catching on fire in some cases, but I found that the fire really helps me get to my destination faster for fear of my life. Also, people really move out of the way when giant hunks of metal are hurtling towards them. Probably the one thing that sold me on the car. I'm really proud of what GM has been able to accomplish by working with the Obama administration. They've proven that in America you can make it in any business as long as you have unlimited financial resources and the backing of the United States government. I don't know about you, but I think that's more than worth the couple $100,000 it costs taxpayers every time somebody buys one of these suckers. I'm sorry, do you smell something?
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. Whoop FM.